Thanks everybody for joining the City of Courtenay's council meeting for January 18th, 2021. I'd like to start by recognizing that we are meeting, gathering, and zooming on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And with that, due to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the City of Courtenay, with the authority of Ministerial Order M192, Local Government Meetings and Bylaw Process, COVID-19 Order Number 3, implemented changes to its open council meetings. In the interest of public health and safety, and in accordance with Section 3, Ministerial Order Number 3, M192, in-person attendance by members of the public at council meetings will not be permitted until further notice. Council meetings will be presided over by the mayor or acting mayor, with electronic participation by council and staff via live web streaming. And with that, we will go into adoption of our minutes from January 11th.
Move adoption.
Second.
Excellent. And were there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, I'll receive those unanimously from council. Just for Eric, if you're listening, I did just get a response back from Councillor Frisch, who did say just now that he hasn't received that invite. So if maybe you could chat to him offline, that would be great, and see if we can get him into the meeting. And with that, we'll start with our delegations, and our first delegation is Lush Valley. And so I'll turn it over to you. Marita, I believe, right?
That's me. I'm just clicking on the screen sharing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Standing by.
Okay.
And I see it, so I think it's working.
And you can hear me, Bob? Everyone can hear me?
You sound perfect. Absolutely.
Perfect. So thanks so much, Mayor and Council, for having myself and Kim join you this afternoon. My name is Marita Prado. Most of you know me. I am the Executive Director of Lush Valley Food Action Society, and I'll let Kim just introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone, and I'm Kimberly Toonders, and I'm a registered dietitian with Island Health, and I work for the Public Health Program.
And so just wanted to briefly put up the Lush Valley vision and mission. As most of you know as well, Lush Valley is involved in local food access for all, particularly vulnerable populations, and working to get as many people as possible just engaged with our local food system. I also wanted just to extend a thank you quickly to the city for supporting so many of our initiatives, particularly our community garden, and the use of the Lower Filberg throughout the COVID pandemic has been essential for us to provide services. So without beating around the bush, and you'll notice in your handbook, it's a pretty big ask that I'm putting to you today. I'm asking for $100,000 to support from your COVID Safe Restart funding to support purchase of local food from the Comox Valley producers to continue our Good Food Box program, and possibly to introduce the Farm Bucks incentive program. So in 2020, here are our stats. We were able, between April and December, to support the community with 11,444 Good Food Box deliveries. These Good Food Boxes are sort of a healthy hamper, so fresh food, but also some staple foods as well. And so we served 604 households. And there's a few more details there, but you can see that about $150,000 went directly to Comox Valley farmers and producers. And I also wanted to just mention, in terms of who we were serving, 83.2% were residents of the city of Courtenay. And when we look at our, we do have an active wait list at the moment, and we are seeing similar numbers in terms of percentage for city of Courtenay residents. Over to Kim.
Great, thanks, Marita. So this slide really shows some of the stats that support evidence of need for a good food box. So in the Comox Valley, we have 21% of children and youth are classified as having a low income. 14.7% for adults and 12.3% for seniors, so that's 65 plus. And this data comes from the Comox Valley local health area profiles, which are put together by our medical health officers. And so really linking this to food is the greatest predictor for food insecurity is low income. So according to the Canadian Community Health Survey, approximately 8.5% of all households are food insecure. And food insecurity really is the first step really in if you're food insecure, then healthy eating is such a huge challenge. So having a food secure household is really foundational to being able to afford nutritious local food. And related to that, food insecure populations have higher rates of chronic disease. So stats really show strong links with diabetes and heart disease, as well as decreased mental well-being, and really strong supports for community programs that can support food security. And as you can imagine, COVID-19 has really increased need for supports for food security. So this is actually from the Vital Signs report for the Comox Valley, and really highlights how food security is about availability and access to food, but it's also about nutritious food and sufficient food to have a healthy and active life. So really looking at that dignified food access is an important piece of it as well, and the types of food. And 1 in 5 children in the Comox Valley experience poverty, according to that report. And we have 31% of Comox Valley food bank users are children.
So I wanted to just point to a report that Andrea Capelli, who's the Coalition to End Homelessness Coordinator, and I put together in 2019. We wanted to look at the intersections of food security, poverty, and housing, and local food, and how we could bridge local food and those food and housing insecure populations. So the study consisted of a number of conversations with farmers and growers and people who were supporting people living in social or housing or transitional housing, as well as people with lived experience. And we ended up having a food programming needs assessment that looked at where there were potential gaps in services and potentials for us to bring more local food access. In that report, again, you can see the good food box is right in the middle of that Venn diagram. We saw that as a really great vehicle to connect the local food and farmer relationships with people dealing with food and housing insecurity, as well as enhancing existing programs through more access to local food. And we put together a 3-year timeline, and this was before COVID, but you can see that we've already reached our good food box goal. But I'd say where we haven't, is potentially just deepening those relationships on the organizational side, so that people's behavior really starts to think about local food as important for those organizational programs. And what we were able to do with this report was leverage 3 years of funding through the Vancouver Foundation to put in place a staff person who could really look at bridging this gap between local food and vulnerable populations. So we've done that.
So here, this really speaks to the values and approach that is used for the good food box. So it's very linked to dignified access and choice. And so a really big part is looking at the big picture of supporting a food systems approach. So really considering a local food economy, meaning supporting local farmers as well as local processing, recognizing importance of a local food system to economic recovery and job creation, as well as really big benefits in regards to the environment. And a large piece of that is climate benefits. So having local food producers that are very tied to the land and have see those strong need for taking care of the land, and really looking at the as well as decreased transportation as well. The other piece is really how much Lush is really looking at food programs from that bigger piece of health. So supporting food literacy linking programs strongly to education, so strong partnerships with the school, as well as larger cross-sectoral partnerships too. So I think really too, if you're familiar with collective impact models, that's really how this is looking at when you're really combining things like housing and low income and food access, and partners coming to the table that have those collective goals, that you can really advance your goals better when you're working under those models. And so these programs to really look at community building and also decrease social isolation.
Thanks, Kim. So, and I think Kim's really highlighted the idea that this is also about rebuilding our economy and strengthening community resiliency. So this slide's about return on investment and your return on investment if you invest in the program. So we will strive to match funding. We have, I've reached out and made a number of applications, some confirmed, some not yet confirmed. But the idea is that we'll match funding with you for this program. Again, the goal is to have as much of the funding actually end up directly in the pockets of farmers and producers, and that, having that value multiply in our community to help to rebuild and that local economy, or continue to build the local economy. We already have this base sort of plan, as I showed you. So we're already we've got some systems and relationships to really make this work, and we're just looking at making it more efficient and more sustainable. I mentioned the secure funding through the Vancouver Foundation, but also we're looking at other possibilities to just incentivize the institutional purchase of local food to try to really grow that, again, the local food economy and the support of producers. So the return will also, in terms of our deliverables, we're talking about 10 to 15 partner organizations, 12 to 20 farmers or producers, and supporting 500 households over 6 to 10 months. So that's sort of the rough idea. I did want to put just a slide in about the Farm Bucks program to give you a sense of what they're doing in the South Island. The Farm Bucks program allows organizations and schools to have farm bucks that work in concert with the local food hub, so that they can spend these farm bucks, but the farm bucks are sort of they're doubling their purchase, so they're able to spend those bucks and get double the value in local food that they would if they didn't have the program. And so incentivizes a behavior change towards partners who may, let's say, go to Costco for a food program and instead go, hey, I can use this local food purchasing system, and I can get really good value for my clients, my recipients, the residents, or whoever they're working with. So that is also something that we're working on developing to incentivize and stretch the budget.
And it looks like thank you. So I won't bother telling you that you're almost out of time.
You bet. There's our thank you slide, and we'll wait obviously for any questions, but I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And while I'm waiting for folks to put up their hand if they want to speak, I guess I'll ask sort of the big question. There is the ask for 100,000. You said that 82% of your clientele or your participants are from the city of Courtenay. So does that mean that you're also requesting from the town of Comox, Village of Cumberland, and the regional district as well?
Yeah, that's right. So the regional district, some of you may know, but their funding's flowing through the community foundation. So I'm in conversation with Susan about that right now. And I think they're figuring out their program because they'll be distributing funds or trying to before March. Cumberland's an interesting one because Cumberland Food Share has a similar program that we partner on. So they actually are purchasing food through our aggregation, but they're doing their own kind of fundraising. So we haven't gone to Cumberland just because that's sort of been the system that has been developed. So we haven't been supporting Cumberland residents directly through our Good Food Box, but we've been supporting Cumberland Food Share, if that makes sense. And then I mentioned the Vancouver Foundation. And provincial gaming. We've also asked for funding through provincial gaming, which we'll find out about in February. We haven't yet gone to Comox, but we do plan on it. It is a smaller percentage of recipients, but we would just probably prorate our ask. as it were. So I hope that answers that question.
I think it does for now, and I'll let others ask some questions. So starting with Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation, Marita. And more importantly, thanks for all the amazing work that your organization has done, especially since we've entered into our pandemic. I've been really impressed with how you guys have expanded your services and really served the needs of the community. So I just wanted to start off with that. I was not totally clear when you were outlining the 500 households over 6 to 10 months. Is the $100,000 the absolute or the estimated cost of that, or is there other funding? Is that only part of the cost of 500 households over 6 to 10 months?
Yeah, that would only be part of the cost. So we would fund, I mean, what I'm hoping for is that this funding would go directly to the local food purchasing, but we would be, making sure that we're covering the staffing, we're covering all of the other elements of cost, and increasing that amount. So it's a good question, but that budget would not cover that entire amount. It would be, well, it depends, but it would be, a half to a third.
Okay, no, that's a pretty good estimate given that we're talking date ranges and round numbers and whatnot. Yeah, I suppose my other question was whether you have approached other municipalities, which the mayor asked as well. It would be good to hear that Comox is willing to participate in supporting Lush as well. I'm not sure if you've received or what type of support your organization has received for them since the pandemic. I know that the city has looked for ways to support in terms of space. Well, I mean, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you're well aware. So it would be nice to see other communities partner, but I mean, I think this council is well aware of the value of what Lush has done over the last year, and there are some funds that are available for supporting a response. So I look forward to discussing it in the future as to what that's going to look like. But thank you.
Thank you. And I think we will approach Comox. We just wanted to get in there with we know that we're serving primarily City of Courtenay. And again, partnering with Cumberland Food Share, and we've been in touch with the Community Foundation, but I think we will also talk to Comox for sure.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And I think one of the things that we might be able to utilize, we do have a finance committee, select finance committee that might be able to speak to this as well. And so but with that, I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Marita and Kimberly, for the presentation. Of course, I'm quite aware of all the great work you folks have been doing this year. I was curious about the piece around this. There's so many parallel things going on here in terms of the food security as well as the COVID recovery and money in the pockets of local producers, et cetera. And I wondered about how you were kind of dealing with the kind of economic recovery piece in terms of promoting, obviously, the people who are getting the food, I'm sure, are getting information about where the food is coming from. But beyond that, in terms of educating or promoting the local producers and their involvement with this program, I wondered if there were any other steps that were being taken, and if there was some work with economic development or other groups to kind of help you with that piece to really promote the local food producers.
Thanks, Wendy, and thank you for all your support. So one of the things that we did at the end of this year was we had a meeting that we hosted with farmers just to get their feedback on how the program worked for them. And primarily they've just been really happy with it. Because one of the things that I think, when we're thinking about food systems and everybody, we want more people to get on board to buy local, but if everybody's going to their farmers separately, it can be really overwhelming for someone who's running a small business. And, so we're trying to really streamline that. And so in meeting with the farmers, we got some really good feedback about that. But interestingly, one of the things that they had talked about was telling the story more broadly. And how are we telling the story? We are planning on putting together a video. Rana Ray might be helping with that, but I think it's going to look kind of like a follow your food video to kind of talk about the program, but to have farmers involved in actually talking about what it's like from their end, and talking a little bit about their farm or the products. So we're looking at different ways to do that. But yeah, I'm very open to other ways to showcase the work, because we did have a farmer basically say, you need to tell more people, like, this is really important. And, so we're open to other ways, but we are looking at putting a video together. Your other question, could you just ask that again, just around economic development and
Sure. My home phone's ringing here, so you'll hear that in the background. Yeah, I was just curious whether, I know you've been connected in with the Economic Recovery Task Force, but I wondered beyond that if you were receiving any support in terms of the economic development piece or economic recovery piece to, because that's not really your primary role, just to I do exactly what you just said, to kind of promote this more broadly, and for folks who maybe aren't aware of the local producers, how to get the word out to them using this program as a stepping stone to that.
Well, in terms of support, like financial support, we certainly, it's just something that we've done without a lot of that type of support, but we are interested, like in that meeting with farmers, we talked about something that's sometimes called a meet your maker, which is basically bringing together groups of farmers and people that would purchase food from them, and having them kind of mix and mingle and talk about what they do and what might work for their program. So we have talked about doing something like that, and so we're looking at something that's a bit more around the relationship building rather than just the promotion. But I think that we're really open to opportunities, and we'd love to be doing more of that, because it really does. I think we are trying to do something that's a little bit unique and needs a little bit of explaining sometimes. And so opportunities to tell that story are going to be important, and we're looking for them. So if you have any ideas, or would like to promote the program, I mean, that's another thing. I think it's a pretty fantastic story to tell, because there's just so many positive spins from an economic perspective and from a food security perspective. So maybe the city wants to make a video.
And I'd quickly add too that, I mean, maybe you can speak a bit more, Marita, about the Farm Bucks program, and how, if that model was adopted, that would really promote local farms too, and how you see that integrating with the current work.
Yeah, so just briefly, the program in the South Island, as I mentioned, the Farm Bucks program has a sort of a food hub where they're doing similar work to what Lush Valley does, but they're providing these farm bucks that allow these schools and organizations to use those farm bucks and get double their value in local food. Again, like, the reason that that's important is it's changing behaviors towards that local food purchase, and kind of cementing those relationships, which will hopefully lead to a bit more sustainability in the program, but also provides continued opportunity to promote the farms, because instead of it just being a Lush Valley program, they're really seeing, okay, well, who are the farmers that are part of the program that our organization is involved in? So, yeah.
And to be clear, you're seeing that the Farm Bucks would go out with a good food box? Like, would that be part of the same program, or?
Yeah, so the farm bucks could be used to purchase good food boxes for clients, or to purchase just local food to support if there was like a meal program. So I'm thinking about the Junction or an organized, like a social housing, in that way that an organization could use it for local food when they're cooking for their clients, or like the Washington Inn, where their clients have their own kitchenette and they receive a good food box. So those farm bucks could be used to purchase kind of the services that work for their clients, but with access to local food.
Excellent. And next we have Councillor Theos.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you, Rita and Kimberly, for the presentation and the work you do in the community. Really appreciate it. I have a few thoughts. One of my thoughts is in regards to having a connection between good food, wellness, and actually fitness and exercise, also part of that whole picture, and the immune system, and we're in a situation right now where we keep talking about risk to illness, but I think we talk very little about strengthening the immune systems, and I think that gets lost in the conversation quite a bit. So I believe moving forward, that to me has to be a foundation of how we're going to have a healthier and stronger and a more vibrant society of citizens. We talked about relationships, Rita and Kimberly, and those relationships. Talked about other community organizations. Now, I've also been told by some people from the business community that there are some of the business organizations that would possibly be interested in helping out, and that could be a possible connection, to tap into. And another thought that I had was in regards to the fact that the pandemic occurred, and people were home during the spring and summer season, and many people took up gardening in their own homes, and it became an explosion. I know even in our own home, we were doing a lot of gardening, and I would say it increased tremendously, to the point where people, even like ourselves, had excess product, and whether it was tomatoes or potatoes or green peppers. Now are these the relationships where just citizens can tap into your organization and say, we want to help. We want to contribute some of the product that we have to help you out. And again, between that and maybe the Rotary clubs or the chambers, they may have some ideas of how to help. Because as you can just imagine, especially with the gaming, with the gaming dollars not going to be there for our society or for our community this year, and as it was in the past. And even moving forward, it's going to be a challenge. There will be a lot of organizations that are going to be reaching out and in need. So it will be, coming into budget season, it will be very interesting to see how many groups will be in need. But just some of those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so that we are thinking about a component of this being a social enterprise. So we are thinking about businesses, and there was a couple of businesses that we were starting those relationships with in 2020 and continuing. And just in terms of the garden explosion, yes, there was a garden explosion. We had lots and lots of followers and people in our workshops and online tutorials. And one thing that I just wanted to mention is that just the amount of volunteerism and people involved, and the connection between anxiety and decreasing anxiety, which also supports the immune function. That's something that we may not have designed for our programs but those were the things that we heard over and over again. Being involved, having your hands in the soil is so supportive of the wellness from the immune perspective, and the decrease of anxiety and depression. So that's really important. And people certainly, the nice thing about having a secure location like the Lower Philburg or the Curling Club is that people can bring excess product, as long as it's of a reasonable volume, to support the program. And so we are doing farm and fruit gleaning as well. And that provides additional value to those good food boxes.
Great. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate too that definitely looking at the bigger picture with regards to health promotion and how healthy food, how important that is to immunity, and for sure in times of pandemic, that's a big thing on people's minds. And there is research we're really seeing around how important vitamin D as well as iron and many nutrients that food insecure households might be low in, how important those are to immunity. So really much better outcomes with COVID-19 when nutrition status is good. So.
Thank you, ladies, for the answers.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I just wonder to what extent you're making any progress engaging with the food bank. I know that initially when the food bank had to shut down, Lush certainly stepped up to fill that gap. But I'm just wondering to what extent, particularly if we were to make some type of financial donation here towards the ongoing good work, how much those efforts are going to be synchronized with what the food bank's doing in terms of shared clients or shared efforts towards food security for the population.
Thanks, Doug. So we haven't been in touch much with the food bank since the pandemic had started. I know that they have a new executive director that I've sort of it's been on my list to try to get in touch and find out what they're doing. What we heard from clients and different folks that were partners early on is that the advantage of the good food box system was the quality of the food, but also Kim kind of referred to it as dignified access, but the delivery of the produce directly to people's homes where they lived or their households. So that was some people. So I think we're in a way at times targeting slightly different populations. But I also think there's an opportunity for us to partner with the food bank. So I know that although the food bank receives a lot of either rescued food or donated food, I know they also are purchasing food, and I know they have a desire to purchase fresh and local food. This program, let's say some of the funds went towards something like a Farm Bucks program where it helped them expand their local food, their access to local food or the expensive local food. You could, like, for example, if we were to get money from the city and we wanted to strengthen that food bank partnership, that could be kind of written in that we would be exploring that idea with the food bank, because they could use, they're getting a lot of food donated, but they also have a food budget. And so some of that budget could go towards a project like this through something like Farm Bucks. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. I know that it's always on my list to chat with them, and it's hard because it's hard to connect sometimes, but I think that there are different people using the services. There's some overlap. I'm sure there's some overlap, but for different reasons, because the services are set up differently. But I think there's opportunity for more collaboration.
Thanks. I do think it's an excellent idea for that to be explored further. And if we consider providing any funding, which we'll have to talk about at a later point, I think it's a good idea that it perhaps be conditional on that sort of cooperation if it's possible. Thanks very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Marita, and thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate hearing about all the remarkable work that's being done and opportunities for us to support you. And you were talking briefly about some of the other local governments, particularly the regional district, which provides support through the Community Foundation. And I was wondering what kind of approaches you'd had with the Community Foundation and what possibilities there are for funding with them outside the sort of the CVRD channel, whether more general funding or matching donations have been available from the Community Foundation.
So a lot of the funding in 2020 came through a lot of the different federal programs. So one of the major funders was actually through the Good Food Organization, which we've been a part of that organization as a good food organization. It's Food Centers Canada that runs it. So the biggest chunk of funding actually came through them. And there was a federal funding that flowed down to the community foundation. That was the sort of lumps of emergency funding. So they had 4 rounds of that funding. We don't yet know if there will be continued funding in 2021. In terms of what the community foundation is offering from a COVID lens right now, that funding ends in March. So the end of the sort of fiscal year is the end of that funding. So I've been in conversation with Susan, but they haven't officially put together their plan of how they're going to distribute the funds, for example, that the CVRD has given them. One of my suggestions, honestly, was to look at this Farm Bucks program, because funding could potentially flow to organizations rather than Lush Valley. They could be, the food bank, for example, but there would have to be an agreement that they would use the food banks with us so that we could source local food and get that to them. So we could support the staffing and the coordination of that system. The food bucks actually goes to different organizations, not necessarily us, but they use our system to get the good food boxes or local food. So that was one suggestion that I'm in discussion. I hope it's okay that I'm talking about I'm in discussion. She hasn't made any decisions. She'd have to go to her board and have that be accepted, or may decide that that doesn't align with the way that they want to distribute those funds. So please, that's like just a discussion happening. It's no decisions have been made. So so I'm not yet sure if there will be additional funds through them. The community funds, we did receive an award for just community funding that's supporting our school program. So we're supporting 14 schools to provide meals with Indigenous education and the Indigenous support workers. So our community funding is from the Community Foundation for 2021 is going towards that.
Thanks for clarifying that. And as you probably know, we don't discuss contributions on the evening we receive a delegation, but I think we all around this table recognize the amazing work you're doing. So look forward to having a chance to discuss that down the road. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
And yeah, so most likely it'll come back to us sometime in the near future. I know staff are busily working on our budgets for this year as it is. So I'm not sure, Trevor Kushner, do you think we should do something tonight, or should we just expect it'll come back on a further future agenda?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it's appropriate that it comes back at a future agenda through the recommendations of the Finance Select Committee and, of course, the financial plan. So it will come back in due course.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thanks, Marita and Jennifer. Really appreciate your presentation today. And, sorry, it was Kimberly. Sorry, my video switched on me. But thanks, Kimberly and Marita. Really appreciate your presentation today. I think council really does appreciate all the work that you guys do beyond this, and really like being updated on where things are at and seeing if there are ways for the city to work with you. So yeah, with that, we'll let you guys go if you want, or you can stay, and we'll move on to our next delegation. And we've got Mike and Lawrence from the Comox Valley Cycling Coalition, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. I'll just start, Mike. Thanks for finding the time to consider our concern. Mike is a very valuable board member of ours of the coalition, and he's our expert presentation guy. And I think you'll see that very shortly. And I know we only have a little amount of time, so I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll just get my screen share going. Can everyone see that?
It's just coming up now, and there it is. Yep, we can see the presentation.
Perfect. I'll just go into slide mode. Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and to the mayor and council, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today with regards to the proposed 6th Street Bridge design. The Comox Valley Cycling Coalition really appreciates being considered as a partner with the city of Courtenay in optimizing an active transportation network that's safe and accessible for everyone. Our primary concern with the council motion of December 9th is the decision to move forward with a 4-meter design width. We feel that 4 meters does not provide safety for users, and most importantly, does not allow for separation of cyclists and pedestrians should the user numbers require that action. We hope to illustrate to you today that the bridge user forecasts being relied upon for design purposes are low, both in the starting point of the forecast and the annual percentage increase assumptions. If one uses a more realistic forecast, the minimum bridge deck width based on the BC Active Transportation Design Guide is 4.8 meters, not 4 meters. We would obviously prefer a 5 to 6 meter wide bridge for safety and user experience purposes. However, we are very aware of the budgetary issues and are here tonight or today to propose a 4.8 meter width. The bridge user forecast created in January 2020 by the Urban Systems Report to city staff has been relied upon for bridge design purposes, specifically the required width. We'll show you how this report chose to use the lower user count starting point and only increase those counts by 3 to 5% per year going forward. As we're all well aware, the number of people cycling and the sales of bicycles have grown in leaps and bounds as a result of the pandemic. Cycling Coalition believes that in fact there is possibility we may exceed the current 30-year user forecast in the first 5 to 10 years, especially since our population is increasing significantly with a lot of retirees who have the time and wherewithal to purchase a bike, many of them e-bikes, as I'm sure you've witnessed in your travels. Remember, the lifespan of this bridge is 50 to 75 years. This shows the user counts that for 2 days in August 2019, Cycling Coalition volunteers conducted a detailed count of active transportation users on the 5th Street Bridge and presented those numbers to council in September 2019. These counts have been very beneficial in understanding how active persons are utilizing the existing bridge and are the best existing source of forecasting future users for the proposed 6th Street Bridge. The 2 days of counting are presented here on an hourly basis with pedestrians in blue, cyclists in orange. The Tuesday count on the left of 1,134 total users was 60% higher than the Saturday count of 692 due to a combination of better weather and weekday commuter traffic on the Tuesday on the left graph. This graph illustrates the issues that we see with the user forecast. It's a bit complicated, but the graph along the bottom just shows the years from 2019 in 5-year increments all the way out to 2059. On the axis up the left side is the user count in people per day. The solid blue and green stars here represent the 2019 actual user counts shown on the previous page, so 1134 and 692. To come up with a starting point for their forecast, the Urban Systems Report first assumed that half of the 5th Street users would move to this new 6th Street Bridge. And these values are then shown as the open blue and green stars down below on the left side. The user counts were then forecast at 3% per year increase for cyclists, 5% for pedestrians. Then a point was chosen 30 years out at 2049 to represent the design basis count of 1,170 per day for the lower Saturday data, which is the green line, and utilize that value to come up with an assumed width requirement of 3.5 to 4 meters. The red line that goes across the graph at 1,400 users per day represents the user count above which a 4-meter bridge is recommended to separate cyclists and pedestrians based on the BC Active Transportation Guide, Table E21. As you can see, the Tuesday count pushes the forecast well above this line. Even the lower Saturday count forecast goes above 1,400, only 5 years after their chosen 30-year design window. To summarize, if one looks at the higher or even the average of the two counts, it becomes evident that lane separation is definitely required. We feel that the assumption of 50% of users moving from 5th Street to the new 6th Street Bridge is also low. especially for cyclists. Assuming there's good connectivity to a network of pathways, we anticipate the vast majority of cyclists will choose to use the proposed 6th Street Bridge. Pedestrian choice of bridges will of course depend on their origin and destination, but certainly most leisure walkers will choose the quieter 6th Street option. This is just an example of what happened. This is the Esquimalt and Victoria ENN rail trail. When safe and active transportation routes are constructed, the user count grows exponentially in the first few years. Cyclists in Victoria were very hesitant to use the Admiral's Road section of the ENN trail until an actual separated pathway, you can see beside the road, was built. This graph shows Strava users on Admiral's Road, shows how the new pathway resulted in more than 200% year growth of riders once the new pathway was built. Note that this Strava data is a voluntary activity tracking app and only represents a very small percentage of the total users, but still shows the relative increase very well. We should be anticipating similar growth for users of the new 6th Street Bridge. The BC Active Transportation Guide does not speak specifically to bridge design. However, the first section of the guide speaks at length the design width of pathways. And table E20 sets 5.2 meters as the desired width for any pathway with an expected high volume of varied users, varied being pedestrians and cyclists. Based on the next table of E21 within the guideline, a pathway over 1,400 users per day should provide separation between cyclists and pedestrians. A number of references within the V&M report presented December 9th to Council stress that separation of users is highly recommended and the 4.8 meter width is the minimum that would be required to separate the users. These two examples show clearly and emphasize that 4.8 meters separated user lanes certainly reduce congestion and increase safety. The biggest issue I think we see is on the west side of where the 6th Street Bridge is proposed, beside Home Hardware. The approach is downhill from the Riverway pathway, and the V&M plan is to provide separated 1.8 meter pedestrian and 3 meter cyclist lanes, the green and the blue shown here, using the existing sidewalk and parking lane. These segregated lanes are then proposed to converge into a non-separated raised crosswalk across the Home Hardware parking lot entrance. Then the cyclists and pedestrians are to merge onto a 4 meter bridge deck. We believe this creates a very dangerous situation involving not just pedestrians and cyclists, but also vehicles. As you can see, it's pretty evident that widening the bridge just to 4.8 meters and providing matching separated user lanes provides for a much safer and far more logical user experience, with cyclists continuing in the blue, pedestrians continuing in the green.
And just you're just at about 30 seconds now.
Okay. So you can see the cost estimate from the V&M report provided for 4.4 for a 4 meter wide cable stayed bridge. Based on there, we used prorationed the 0.8 meters between the 4 and the 5 estimate they provided, 674,000 extra, or 15%. And remember that we wrote a letter to the council in December 2019 for supporting removal of the cantilevers in order to move forward with the 6th Street, which saved $2 million, which brings the net cost of 5.1 down to 3.1 million. And also there's another $600,000 of optional items that could be removed and built at a later time. Bridge width cannot be done at a later time. So how do we move forward? What are we asking? In light of the information, we respectfully request that council reopen discussion on the 6th Street Bridge process. In the interim, we ask council to direct staff as they move forward to not do anything restricting the width to just 4 meters. We'd also like to have the recommendation for future stakeholder as information only reconsidered as well. And our final thoughts, we understand that there are time constraints to get this project to shovel ready in anticipation of possible future active transportation grants. And the COVID pandemic has added additional challenges to managing a project of this magnitude. However, we'd respectfully suggest that it is tantamount to have strong public support for this key piece of our active transportation network. It's always challenging to maintain a long-term view of a project such as a bridge when the expenditures are compacted into the short term and become a political discussion rather than a contemplation of an investment with a 50 to 70 year lifespan. We're asking you to consider the longer term implications and ensure we make a proper investment. As you've noted probably in your handout, there is a lot more information in the appendices we've included. We'd be happy to answer any questions. And once again, thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation today. And we look forward to continuing to work with you.
All right, thanks, Mike and Lawrence. And I'll open it up to questions to council. I don't see any right now, so maybe I'll just ask a quick question. I know when this project, I first became aware of it, serendipitously was members of my Rotary Club that had brought forward some stuff and doing a wood frame, timber frame decking and bridge back, 10 years ago or so now, probably even a little bit longer. And one of the things from a funding side of things was, there was a big push. Obviously, I believe that Timber Builders Guild was going to provide some labor, but also getting some, I guess, fundraising happening to help pay for it as well. And just wondering if that's something that you guys have contemplated in this process as well.
I think we'd be happy to support any fundraising efforts we can going forward, any grant applications we can support as the Cycling Coalition or any fundraising efforts. I think we'd be more than happy to be involved in that.
Definitely.
Okay, and I see some questions now, so I'll hand it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation, Lawrence and Mike. Yeah, I mean, your numbers are absolutely interesting, and they look to be quite accurate based on the counts you did. What I actually have is a question for staff. I don't know if staff are open to the idea of taking questions right now. Is that possible? That's my first question.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, I'll probably leave this with the mayor to respond, but we typically don't do that in delegations, a back and forth. It's more of a take the information. We, of course, have this recorded. So if it's council's will, we would go back and watch it, review it, and staff would identify the questions and provide council with those answers and qualifications.
Sure, I can do it that way. I can ask the questions, and obviously the presenters won't be able to answer them, but I think they would add to the discussion. The first question I have is if the width of the bridge is a nominal number or if it's an actual number. And by that, I mean, if we build a 4-meter wide bridge, is that the usable width of the deck, or is that, the width of the bridge, which includes the railings and other pieces? I'm also wondering if our Class D estimate I'm pretty sure it has a contingency, and I couldn't remember how much that was. And then the 2 million for cantilevers that was mentioned in the presentation, my recollection is that it was 2 million, sorry, for the cantilevers, which included some infrastructure on either side, and the cantilevers themselves were actually only, maybe it was 1.4 million or something, or 1.2 million. So I'm wondering on the accuracy of that number. And I guess this is just a bit of an off-the-cuff question, and that's about the cantilevers being possible in the future. I imagine if we decide to do something like that down the road, it would be at a huge cost because we'd have all the setup and breakdown. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And when you say cantilevers, you're thinking the cantilevers on the 5th Street or to add them later on to the 6th Street to make it wider? Yeah.
The contemplation is that if pedestrian and cycling usage goes up dramatically in the next 15, 20 years, is there an opportunity to build more infrastructure and perhaps use that idea of cantilevers again? I know those were going to be the first thing in our project on 5th Street, so I'm assuming they can just be added on, take the old ones off, put new ones on. but I'm going to guess that there'd be a huge additional cost to the original price to them because of all the setup and tear down and all the rest. Thanks.
All right. And I'll move on to Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation, Mike. It was thorough and thoughtful. It was good to hear your take on why the 4 meters is not perceived as wide enough for your organization. I also want to acknowledge all the thoughtful emails that I received from the Cycling Coalition over the last week. It's obviously something that the membership is pretty concerned about, so I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. I suppose my first question for you is just around the top end of that user graph, showing that it could land upwards of 2,000 trips a day rather than 1,400. If I'm seeing those numbers correctly on my screen, they're kind of small, so forgive me if I've got that wrong, but I'm curious if you happen to know of other cycling routes on the island that see that type of ridership. Just I could kind of make a mental comparison of what we would be talking about at a 2,000 trip a day type of multimodal path. Do you happen to know that?
I don't have data off the top of my head, but some of the bigger ones, Galloping Goose and such, are thousands per day. I don't know the exact numbers on that. Based on the 5th Street count of what we saw for active users, it was 1,134 on a Tuesday, and I certainly don't see us being very long in the future to be 2,000 users a day, especially with a much better facility, much better crossing provided, safer and more aesthetically pleasing crossing. Those users would increase, I think. And 2,000 a day isn't out of line. Whether that's 30 years in the future, I think it's way sooner than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm not questioning whether or not that's a possibility. I'm just curious if you have a comparison there for what that looks like. My sense is that it would probably be similar to the Galloping Goose, and I know that there's 4-meter crossings on the Galloping Goose, so I'm just trying to get a mental picture of what our optimistic scenario is there. Yeah. And I definitely agree with it. I mean, that is part of why we're motivated to put in better cycling into infrastructure, is to hopefully see more trips made by cyclists across the river, and to alleviate some of the traffic congestion, hopefully too. I guess the other question I had for you is, you don't make mention of the other side, the bridge, but I suppose that the proposition here is not just to widen it, but to provide a separated pathway for pedestrian and cyclists through Sims Park. Is that what you're envisioning with this?
We would certainly hope so. The best thing about Sims Park is that there's more room to provide. If a pathway needs to be widened or separated in the future, that can be done. The west side, on the 6th Street side beside Home Hardware, is somewhat more restricted in that it's got traffic and business and streets and laneways, etc., already there. Sims, if you built a 4.8 meter matching pathway on the east side and needed to widen it in the future, you could readily do that.
Okay, yeah, I guess I wanted to express that I certainly can envision a much easier crossing, especially for cyclists that want to move quickly, although we do have 5th Street available for that, especially for e-bikes. So to me, it's not whether or not would be an overall benefit from the widening. I think I can see why that would be appreciated, but I'm looking at kind of wider picture and just exactly what we would like to see built across from east to west in Courtenay. It's not just the 6th Street Bridge, but a safe pathway right across town. And by taking $675,000 of our limited resources and investing that into simply separating bikes from pedestrians, I think I would rather see us invest in separating cyclists from vehicle traffic. So it's not that I don't think that there's a good case to be made for a wider width. It's just with other constraints and all of the pieces of the cycling network plan that we have yet to fund. I'm just not confident that adding a significant cost onto this project is the best way to improve cycling and improve safety. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, or where I'm landing on this right now. But I'll pass it to others. Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess I come back to the fact again that it is a bridge and cannot be added on to easily in the future. I'm sure many of us would like to see the 5th Street Bridge a little wider right now when we're having our problems with that. But it isn't, and we can't do anything about it. So looking at a bridge, we have to look at that now. The other stuff we can extend in the future.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into too much of a debate about pinch points and stuff like that, but I'll pass it on to Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mike and Lawrence. I appreciate the time you put into these slides. You can obviously see the detail and the analysis that's gone into this. And like Councillor McCollum, we've also been receiving messages, heartfelt messages from members of the coalition. I can tell it's an important issue, and glad to have a chance to discuss it today. I guess that one of the interesting things to consider is the numbers, obviously, which you're coming to, and those numbers came from a study done by Dan Casey, who I guess literally wrote the book on standards for cycling infrastructure in British Columbia. He initially came down with 3.5 meters being the minimum and 4 being a margin beyond that. And I just want to say, you know, I cycle to work every day. My bike's locked outside my office where I am right now, and I can in a world where we're choosing between projects and priorities as a council were no issue. I think a 6-meter wide bridge would be wonderful, with room for people to stop and enjoy the view. Unfortunately, obviously there are many different priorities that we have to balance. I mean, as you know, the delegation that came before you was talking about food for needy people. So there are many different priorities that the council has to balance. And I guess what I'm coming to is looking at whether 4 meters for certain points, it's obviously the bridge is a limited part of the journey from east to west, whether that does seem to work. And I was struck by the fact that on the north shore of Vancouver, the Spirit Trail and running between Vancouver and New West, the Central Valley Greenway, both have 4-meter bridges throughout their systems and seem to be able to handle safely the number of users. Do you have any knowledge of what the usage numbers are on those kinds of very urban, to my experience, having walked and ridden them before, heavily used trails, what those are like per hour?
I don't have any specific data on them. It's difficult to get data. In fact, much like municipalities around here, we would really like to see a lot more actual count data. The data we used from the 5th Street Bridge was done by volunteers. We'd like to see a lot more automated count data, but to answer your question, I don't have count data on that. I think the big difference in this one is it's being proposed to be a centerpiece and a gathering place as well as a transportation corridor. And there's going to be a larger pedestrian component to it, which if you look in the design guide really throws it into wider widths to accommodate separated lanes for pedestrians and cyclists, where some of those are far more of a leisure cycling or a commute that you're speaking of, or more of a commuter or leisure cycling route, as opposed to kind of a tourist and walking route that this may end up to be.
Yeah,
sorry, Lawrence, go ahead.
Oh, I think you've muted yourself, Lawrence.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Mike said, I've ridden most of those bridges in the Lower Mainland, and they're not like going to the downtown core of a city as ours would be. They are spread out. Yes, there's more people in the Lower Mainland, but I've actually never found a problem in any of those bridges. But for the same reason that we said, population and then the amount of usage will be significantly greater in this part. If we were putting this bridge out in Merville, no problem.
Okay, I mean, I take your point that well, I think things like the Central Valley Greenway, which I used to use, actually is used quite a lot by commuters because it follows the SkyTrain route underneath. And the point where I used to access it was Commercial and Broadway, which is a fairly densely populated area, certainly more than Merville, and I would say even more than Courtenay. Anyway, I appreciate the presentation, and I can see that in an ideal world where we could build every piece of infrastructure so it would fit all service needs for the next half century, and where we had the option to build for that capacity, that a 6 meter or even a 4.8 meter would be desirable. I think given the study that we have, and given that it was put together by the greatest authority in British Columbia on cycling safety and capacity, I'm going to say that I think that sticking with those numbers and looking at the 4.0 width, which has seemed to work, and as you said, you cycled the Central Valley Greenway and the Spirit Trail in the North Shore, and without it being a problem, crossing 4 meter bridges. And given that, and also the Galloping Goose has 4 meter bridges, I think it may indicate that it's not perhaps optimal, not ideal, but certainly a manageable choice, and certainly in much busier locations than we find ourselves in. Anyway, I know there are other speakers, and I can tend to ramble at times. So thank you for your time, and I'll just cede the floor.
All right, thanks, Councillor Cole-Hamilton, and Councillor Theos.
Thanks very much. It's interesting when we're talking about the counts. And, you're showing on the graph, you were showing the counts of 1,100 on a Tuesday in the summertime in August. And it was a beautiful 27 degrees sunshiny day. And then it dropped almost in half to just over 600 on a Saturday with overcast weather. And, those were some of the questions I had in my mind, is that, we take 2 days in the summertime, and it was excellent that the volunteers from the coalition were able to take those number counts, but we didn't really get a broader count of how that bridge was used for cycling and pedestrians. And when you look at the significant drop just in those 2 days because of cloudiness, we're a community that gets maybe 8 months of the year of rain and cold weather and short hours of light, and we may be looking at less than a few hundred a day for the majority of the year. And I know myself, I went a few times during the year, 3 or 4 times, and I sat at Fifth Street and just sat there for an hour and a half or so, and just during the peak times of the day, and just watched over the bridge and did my own count. And there was a few times those days where I was seeing less than 10 people crossing that bridge on a rainy day. So it's all relevant to how you're looking at numbers. So the reality is that there's a few challenges here. That cost constraints are what you mentioned. Now, we have thousands of people in the community that find a $4 to $5 million expenditure is intimidating to them. It's frightening to them. And so my question to you is that when you're talking about safety for cyclists, then we can only do our best under the cost restraints. So many of the roads that we have in our community, because of cost restraints and trying to balance these many kilometers of roads within our community, a lot of those roads need upgrading. A lot of those roads have potholes that need fixing and repairing. A lot of our sidewalks need improving to create safety for pedestrians. We don't have the money for those areas. So my question is to you is, why is cycling more important than fixing the roads to create safety for the roads and the sidewalks. That's just, I think, my question, along with thousands of others in our community, because, you know, that's the question that I get asked every day.
Councillor Theos, I think it's not, it is as important, and it hasn't been as important for many years. And that's why we are right where we are right now with cycling infrastructure. We have been car oriented for so long that we're trying to catch up. Secondly, as far as your bicycle counts, 10 people on a rainy day, we don't build infrastructure for the lowest possible number of users. We look at at least average or more than average numbers. So those are my two comments. Mike.
All right.
The biggest thing that I see is, as well as, and trust me, I drive a car. I'm a bicycle commuter and always have been. I was in the oil and gas business for God's sake. I found fossil fuels for people to burn. So I know where you're coming from. But if you build safe cycling infrastructure and take one person out of a car and multiple people out of cars to ride bikes, it makes the whole world a better place. It makes you spend less on roads. It makes you spend less on car accidents. It makes you spend less on health insurance all the way down the line. There's huge benefits, and it's been proven. I mean, for a city that has a greenhouse gas and a carbon goal, it would surprise me that the majority of the people don't feel that this is a good idea.
Thanks for the answers, gentlemen. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mike. That was good.
All right, and Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I do appreciate the count that was done by volunteers. I know I met with some folks early on and put that out to the group, and I know the group was really great at jumping on that to provide us with some numbers. And I don't agree with many of the comments that have been made, not tonight, but from other folks saying that the numbers were embellished or whatever, because actually, frankly, it reflects a lot of non-cycling traffic going back and forth. And so if it was really to embellish the cycling numbers, then that's not really what happened. So I do take the points of safety really seriously, because I know that, well, I have an e-bike now, and I was already walking a fair amount on the various trails. And first of all, I've seen the traffic on the trails in general, pedestrian, cycling, you name it, increase so much. And certainly I agree with Councillor Theos that most people aren't out on miserable days necessarily, but I would say that there are a lot of people out on kind of gloomy days, because we have a lot of gloomy days, and if you want to get out, that's what you have to do. So I've been out a fair amount lately, and I would say the traffic has increased a lot on the Riverway and Air Park, etc. So I do see the point of, obviously, in an ideal world, having wider would be better, and looking ahead to the future. I'm hoping that we can put in some other safety, some other safety features. I know that we've had comments from around the community in terms of the speeds that e-bikes get up to, obviously, especially going down a hill, etc. So we're going to need to address those kinds of things, not just in this project, but across the community. So I guess it always comes down to trying to balance all these needs. And I think, as Councillor Theos pointed out, we do have these extremes of people saying that we shouldn't even be doing a multimodal bridge at all, and to others that are saying thank goodness it's finally happening, and we need to actually make it more expansive than it is. So it's a struggle, and I think we'll just have to do our best to come up with the best balanced decision. I do believe that COVID has brought out more people as well. And I think it's creating a behavioral change that maybe we haven't reflected in this conversation or in others, that I think that these increased numbers are here to stay. So I think that is something important to look at. I'd point out that the cantilevers, you know, one of the reasons, it wasn't a unanimous decision, but I think one of the main reasons was the expense. So it would be hard to justify increasing the expense for this when, you know, we decrease the expense with the cantilever. So I guess I'm just kind of reflecting on a bunch of different things, but I do agree that safety is a consideration, and also that this particular area is a real combination of leisure and, you know, there'll be commuters, but it's kind of putting a bunch of different eggs in a basket and trying to make the best scenario work for everybody with diverse needs. And it is a challenge for sure. But I do appreciate the presentation. And as I said at the beginning, I appreciate the volunteer hours that went into the count. And I think it was very thoughtfully done and wasn't, you know, embellished in any way. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Mike and Lawrence, for the presentation. I find myself in agreement with most of your points. 23 of your members or people who know about your activities have written to me, and I assume the other councillors advocating for this position. And I've responded to all of them, letting them know that a number of the issues that have been raised by other council members here today, we don't have unanimous support for this project, although I do think we probably have majority support. You will know from reading social media and other communication channels that a lot of people would rather see us build a different kind of bridge to have more cars going across the river. But if we're able to move forward with this project as it is proposed, notwithstanding the possibility of making it wider, I think it's going to take people in the community, such as yourselves and your organization, coming to the table with dollars. And I think if you were prepared to engage in a fundraising campaign with your membership and make a commitment to come to the table with some money to go towards the project, we'd have a lot better chance of moving forward with what you're advocating for. We're going to be challenged to deliver this project as it is. We don't know what the grant situation is going to be. And we're also, if we do have to borrow, which I hope we don't, we're going to be competing with other projects, and we're going to be creating a cost that'll be borne by the taxpayers of Courtenay for something that will benefit the entire region. So I would really like us to put a challenge out to the members of the community who are passionate about this project to go back to the original idea, which was that substantial amounts of money would be raised at the community level to try and make this a reality. I really want to see this project happen, but I think it's got a far more greater likelihood of happening either way if we can get community members to support it, both in spirit but also with cash. So I don't know if you have any comment about that, but that is the message that I've shared with your members, and I look forward to seeing what might be possible there. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. I'm certain we would be happy to push forward with some fundraising. You know, this is all fairly short notice that we were working under the assumption that there would be some ability to separate cyclists from pedestrians, and that's our only issue here. You know, if you could safely separate pedestrians and cyclists with a 4-meter bridge, we'd be all in favor of it, and I think we'd be very happy to work on fundraising for it, whether it was 4 meters or 5 meters. The challenge will be, as the design is moving forward post haste, and is right now restricted to a 4-meter design, that if we went out and raised money, we would want to raise money towards a 4.8-meter wide bridge to allow safe separation of cyclists and pedestrians, as is recommended by the active transportation guide. So we'd love to do that, but with the expectation that that can't be done overnight. If we spend 6 or 12 or 18 months raising money for this, we're now sitting with a 4-meter design. So it's
well, you know, I don't want to speak for council or staff, but you know, I wonder if you talk to your membership and others in the community, like Harry Holland and the 6th Street Bridge Committee, and came to council or staff with a proposal saying, if we can raise $500,000 in the next 2 years, would you agree to make the bridge wider? I think that's a pretty solid conversation starter. You know, but you know, we can look at what the community has been able to do with other projects, such as Couscous, where there's been a will to pitch in together and make a project like this happen. And I think it would be a tremendous tribute to the spirit of this community if we were able to do the same with a project like this, which has so many benefits for so many people. Anyway, I'll leave that with you.
Thank you. That's something we'd absolutely be happy to look at, not just for this bridge, but for the cycling network in general.
Excellent. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I ask another question. Just on this suggestion that Councillor Hillian has raised, am I correct in interpreting that perhaps the preference of the Cycling Coalition would be to delay this project while we look at fundraising? Is that kind of what the if we're not willing to change the decision at 4.8, is the preference that that council slow down this project another year or two and look for fundraising to happen? Is that something that you would support?
I'm wondering, since we're moving into the design phase, whether there's a potential to actually get a much more accurate cost for both the 4 and the 4.8 meter bridge, to actually see what the cost would be.
And as long as we don't pigeonhole anything, and that's what we you know, one of our asks at the end of our presentation was move forward with the design phase, because having shovel-ready projects is the only way to go these days. So move forward with it, but don't pigeonhole anything at a specific width. That's our only ask. We'd be happy to do that immediately and move forward as we have been, but don't restrict any change to widen or, you know, otherwise improve the bridge design.
Yeah, we have a board meeting next
Okay.
Thursday. We have a board meeting next Thursday, and certainly we'll discuss this fundraising idea at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Mike and Lawrence, I really want to thank you for your presentation today. And again, as been mentioned before, the very detailed slides and information to give us something to contemplate. I know as an avid cyclist, I did live in Victoria for about 10 years doing the Galloping Goose on weekends and days off, but commuting to work during the week. And then moving to the Comox Valley and Courtenay in particular, not realizing that 6th Street East is one of the steeper hills. It was a lot of good fun. And even when my twins were born, it was quite a challenge getting up there with my little trailer on my bike. But I was able to do it. I don't exactly know how now that I look back at it, but you know, seeing the advent of the electric bikes now, certainly see, you know, a lot more people out, even in the colder weather. We have snow coming next week. But I think going back to, and I think I made the comments early on, and I've heard reiterated throughout this, is, you know, when we look at the Cumberland Community Forest Society, when we look at Couscous, there is a real appetite from the community to do certain projects that aren't necessarily viable or economically possible to do necessarily from the municipal level, but working with these organizations, I think we've got some really good positive success models to kind of look at. And I know, again, just looking at my Rotary Club, there was a lot of passion there. But if we look at sort of that pendulum of where this project was, say, 10 or 15 years ago, I think it was a much more niche than it is right now. I think there's a much broader support for this project. And again, as has been mentioned by other councillors, just the fact that if we're able to get some dollars to come in from the community on this project in particular, that might help us move forward in a wider bridge potentially. But barring that, it is a pretty difficult conversation to have, given the other issues that we have, the other priorities that we have, and the fact that we're coming out of a pandemic. And you know, we just had our finance select committee meeting last week where we discussed what our losses are. And even with getting money from the government, it's really backfilling some of those losses. So it's not necessarily putting us ahead of the game. You know, it's absolutely challenging, but obviously we're happy to have that conversation. And we've actually talked quite a bit today about it. So again, really want to thank you for your presentation and your dialogue, and really want to see us continue this conversation going forward. And with that, yeah.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate that.
All right, Mike and Lawrence, thanks again. And we'll let you guys go unless you want to hang on and watch the rest of the council meeting, but you can watch it on YouTube and Facebook later on if you want to.
All right, thank you.
All right, moving right along, we have external reports and correspondence, and we have the ABICC call for resolutions.
Move receipt.
Second.
Excellent, and maybe I'll pass it over to staff. Trevor Kushner.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a notice for request for submissions of resolutions for Vancouver Island communities through the ABICC. I think at this point, it might be appropriate to refer back to staff to begin collating any staff resolutions that are in existence. And we would do that through our corporate officer. And through the corporate officer, I would suggest that council could also propose some of their potential draft resolutions. And then at a later date, prior to the deadline of February 26th, that we bring back a staff report with the collated amounts of potential resolutions, and council by consensus would make that decision which ones go forward.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And yeah, so with that, I think that answers most of that. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I know there'll be a lot of resolutions related to municipal financing, but I wonder if in staff consideration, we might look at some specifics around things like bylaw enforcement, the challenge of problem houses, and again, the alleviation of campsite issues among some of the other challenges that we've been dealing with. I think those would be useful things to bring forward to the ABICC floor. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I think one I'm not sure if you guys have received some of the emails and phone calls. I've received quite a few lately, and it's been something that's been going on a long time for some of our areas in our community around speeding traffic. And it has come forward to ABICC and UBCM, but it may be worthwhile to bring forward or discuss the potential of reducing residential traffic speeds to 30 kilometers an hour, which is a form of traffic calming, but doesn't require any necessarily any infrastructure like speed bumps and those kinds of things. That might be a possibility. Anything else that anybody wants to throw out, or again, we can always follow up by email and have this conversation. We do have some time, just over a month, to kind of discuss it. So hopefully we'll all do our homework, and we'll come forward with some great ideas to bring forward to ABICC. And with that, again, it's just an external report, so there's no motions or anything. So we'll maybe just receive that unanimously from council, and we'll go into reports and updates. And I know Councillor Cole-Hamilton, you had an update.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. I just wanted to say that on Saturday afternoon, evening, I attended the first AGM of the Comox Youth Climate Council, which is a newly formed body of young people from around the valley. And interestingly enough, it's the previous sort of incarnations were mostly high school students, and this one is from ages 13 to 25. So you've got some university students, some high school students, and it was a 2-hour meeting. It was professionally run. Like I've gone to many AGMs run by adults that were not nearly as organized or as much fun. At one point towards the end, there was actually a Kahoot game show quiz, which I managed to finish the top 10 out of 15 in, and it was a remarkable and motivated group of young people. And one of the sort of initial possibilities for collaborations is that there's in the AVICC area that we're just speaking of, which is Vancouver Island and the North Coast, there's an informal body called the Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Climate Leadership Group, put together by Josie Osborne and Lisa Helps, and there's a representative from each regional district, and I happen to be the representative for the CBRD. And coming up this year, there's a planned conference for, we had a conference in November and felt there was not nearly sufficient representation by youth or by Indigenous members of the community, and are planning a follow-up which seeks to really bring those parts of the community in. And there seems to be strong interest by the young folks at the AGM about getting involved in that kind of regional conference and putting some concrete plans together. So I'm sure we'll be running across them as a delegation or in other ways around the community, but it was a real pleasure, and one of those rare kind of bright spots that happens during a dark pandemic to see people full of optimism about the world and ready to put their time and their energy towards making it better. So anyway, just happy to report that that's a new development here in the Valley.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. Councillor Frisch, did you have anything to add? All right, Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. Council will recall that on December the 21st, we received an invitation to come and see the use that was being made of the Philberg for the Christmas hamper program. And of course, we weren't able to do that because we had a council meeting at that time. I'd sent belated thanks to Mr. Rob Phillip for that invitation, and also for, in fact, his coordination along with his team of the hamper program. And I received a response back, which I will share with council by email. But he just expressed how perfectly the space suited their needs. He said, much as they appreciate yearly donations from businesses, they couldn't have hoped for a better spot. And they were incredibly grateful to the City of Courtenay and our staff who worked out the arrangements for the use of the space this year. They were able to brighten Christmas with hampers and gifts for over 500 families. And I just wanted to acknowledge that tremendous display of volunteer spirit by Mr. Phillip and his team in our community, and the role of our staff in helping to make it happen this year. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Councillor Hillian. And again, a huge thanks to staff. Councillor McCollum?
I don't have anything. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Morin, I believe you said you were good, or did you have anything?
No, I'm
right.
fine, thank you.
And Councillor Theos? Any library? Nothing, we're good. Excellent.
No, later in this month, we're going to have a meeting.
Excellent.
Or AGM.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I am happy to report that the library is still functioning. It did take me a little bit to learn the new checkout process now that the doors are open, but I was able to make it in and out to get some pickups. So really happy to see that service is still functioning and providing the service to the community. I will mention a couple of things. last Thursday. I want to thank Councillor Cole Hamilton for meeting with the local Downtown Business Association to really give them a heads up on the press release that came out today on the co-op housing initiative that we're working on, and really to work and start that dialogue with the downtown businesses so that they're a little bit more aware of what's happening as a key stakeholder when a lot of the locations are in the downtown area. I also want to thank Councillor Hillian and Councillor McCullum, and Councillor Cole Hamilton was there as well for the Finance Committee meeting. We've started those again, so just really happy to see that those things are happening. And you know, I think there's been sort of I don't know if it's pent up, but like in the new year, there's been a lot more communications. Again, a lot of communications regarding the bike lanes, traffic, and various other things, and really kind of nice to see that the community is still engaged. And a huge thank you again. Councillor Hillian talked about the hamper program, but all the nonprofits out there right now that are just continuing to work their butts off to make our community as good as can be, and just really appreciative of that. And with that, we'll move into resolutions of council. We have a in camera.
I can move that, Mayor. I'll move that a special in-camera meeting closed to the public will be held January 18th, 2021 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting pursuant to the following subsection of the community charter: 91C, labor relations or other employee relations; 91F, law enforcement, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment; 91I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose.
Second that.
Excellent. Any questions or comments regarding that? Seeing none, I'll just poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. And moving into bylaws for third reading.
Mayor, I'm happy to move that the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3014-2020 for 1375 Piercy Avenue pass third reading.
Excellent. That's been seconded. And so again, I'll poll council, starting with, Councillor Hillian, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We did have a public hearing and we had submissions from the public, so I think we should address those before voting. And I'm just wondering if our planning staff have any response to the issues, which seem primarily to be about the viability of the lane, its impact on garbage and traffic. I think we had contrary perspectives on the issue of who the householders may be, but I think we have general support for the fact that this is a habitat project. And I know this piece of land, there's been an attempt to rezone it for building on 3 successive occasions. And I think we have, at this point, a project that makes a lot of sense. And as we say, a responsible organization providing stewardship. But we seem to have still some issues related to traffic. And I'm just wondering if staff could comment on those, please.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So I guess one that I noted was the length of vehicles and the possibility that they would stick out into the lane and block traffic. And for the 90-degree stalls that are planned, they exceed the 5.5 meter width. They have an extra, it's 1.2 meters added to them. So there'd be extra. Sorry, the 5.5 meter length. So there'd be an extra 1.2 meters in length added to those stalls, which would help to mitigate any longer vehicles that may hang out into the lane. with regards to things like garbage collection. Bins, as council may recall, originally were planned to be picked up on Piercy Avenue. That was of course changed in the revision to the application. So there's now a building and garbage bins that are at the back of the property on garbage days. Those are the two that I've noted. If there's more specific ones, I can certainly address those.
Yes, the other issue, I think it was spoken to by the architect for the project, but it related to traffic emerging onto to Piercy and the changes in the landscaping that seem to be necessary in order to ensure visibility.
Yeah, so with regard to, I guess we call it the site triangle or site distances, there may be landscaping changes that would be required as part of the development permit process. So after the zoning is concluded, this still needs a development permit. And as part of that, we would check to make sure that sight lines are maintained. From what I can see, they're fine. The landscaping is very low there, and there's no buildings that obstruct views either way on Piercy. But that's something we can double check as part of the development permit process.
Thanks very much.
And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, one of the comments that I have noted is a request that the alley access be one way and be exited. I think it's onto Tull rather than onto Piercy. Are we contemplating making that change, or does staff have any comment on that request, on that particular?
Thanks for the question. No, not as part of this this initial rezoning. We aren't looking at making it one way. It's again something that we could reconsider as part of the development permit process. The lane itself is built standard that would allow cars to pass by each other. And I'm not clear on the actual benefit to a one way. So it's again something we could re-examine as part of the development permit, but this time we're not considering one way.
If I could just make a quick comment, something to ponder was when I participated in one of the OCP workshops, losing kind of public neighborhood space in the alleyways to parking is something that's been happening around downtown as we look to densify, and we're providing more development that has their parking tucked in behind. And it's similar where we're having more parking right off the alleyway, which I don't gathering space where kids are, traditionally have played their games, especially when we're looking at a development like this one that has less yard space and more residential. That providing a one-way alley does allow for kind of safer use for kids and people that are hanging out in the alleyway that are not using it for driving a car. So I do think that there is a good case to make for considering that, especially because this is going to be a pretty well-used alley. It's not your typical just, a back alley with a few residences. So I think it is something that's probably worthwhile considering. Thanks.
All right, and Councillor McCollum, just so you know, your audio was cutting in out a little bit, your video a little bit more significantly. I think we probably caught it all, but just so you're aware.
Yeah, my internet has been terrible all night, so I'm sorry about that. Not much I can do.
Okay. And Matt, did you want to respond to Councillor McCollum's last comments?
Yeah, sure. I think just reiterate my comments that something we could re-examine as part of the development permit to see if their engineer recommends it, and if there is a safety benefit to it, and something again that we could then implement if there is if there is rationalization and investigation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment on some of the sentiments that were being expressed around the social issue, the concerns about social issues. And I don't want to really paraphrase what Mr. McKenna from Habitat for Humanity responded with, because he's so articulate and eloquent in what he says. But I think it's important that we make sure that we kind of call out any stigmatizing sentiments that are in the community. Habitat for Humanity actually, I believe, enhances the communities that they have their housing in. As Mr. McKenna pointed out, residents are provided training with finances and house maintenance, and I know they have lots of neighborhood community events, etc. And I think that folks, it upsets me when folks are being stigmatized for frankly living in poverty or being kind of victims of low wages. So I think that again, as Habitat for Humanity has come up in many different areas lately, that those property values have actually increased, which was pointed out. So I think that this development is actually a good news story for the neighborhood and may provide some some good connections with the neighbors. And I just wanted to make sure that those comments were made, because I know it's very upsetting to folks who are living in those circumstances, and to feel like the neighbors, feel that way about them, I'm sure is difficult. So I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. And yeah, I think the Habitat model is pretty special in the fact that it does take the time to do training and even just their selection process. And again, the people who get selected, they do sweat equity. They are working their butts off to get those houses built. And so really appreciate you making those comments. Councillor Theos.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add to Councillor Moran's comments, and I was going to talk about the sweat equity, so thank you, Mayor. But no, I was around for the first project that Habitat built in Courtenay, and that was going back now many years. And that was the one by the Rialto Theatre there, and it's been a success story along with many of the other ones. I find the model for Habitat, the people are taking such great pride in where they're living and investing into seeing that those homes come to fruition by, exactly as you said, with the sweat equity and other educational areas of being involved in seeing that project, those homes that they're living in, move forward. So yeah, I just wanted to add that I've seen nothing but success with these projects from the very beginning.
Thanks, Councillor Theos. And with that, I think we've had a fairly fulsome discussion. So at this point, I'll maybe call a question, and we'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
Excellent. I'm in favor as well. So that's unanimous. And on to the next zoning amendment bylaw.
I'm happy to move the zoning amendment bylaw number 3005/2020, also for 1375 Piercy Avenue, past third reading.
Second.
Excellent. And I know we've just had a discussion, but are there any further questions or comments? And seeing none, I will poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
And Councillor Frisch.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
Favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Support.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Next, we have another zoning amendment bylaw for third reading.
I can move this one. I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2998/2020 for 2466 Wellbrand Place, a bylaw to rezone property from residential 1B zone to residential 1S zone to allow for a secondary suite at 2466 Wellbrand Place. Be moved.
Second.
All right, thanks. And that's for third reading. And again, we did have a public hearing. So did councillors want to weigh in on some of the discussion points that were brought up? And I'm not sure that we had too many on this one in particular. And seeing none, I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
And Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
And Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran. And I didn't hear you, Councillor, but I saw your mouth move as in favor. If you want to just nod, make sure we got that. And Councillor Theos.
I am in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Fantastic. All right, that was third reading. And we have another one for third reading on Willamar.
Mayor, I'm happy to move that zoning amendment bylaw number 3009-2020 for 1550 Willamar Avenue, which is a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 2500-2007 to rezone property from residential 2 to a newly proposed residential 1E zone, and amend schedule number 8 zoning map to facilitate the compact infill development. And that passed third reading.
Second.
Second.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. Did any of the councillors want to speak to this? Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, Mayor, thanks. I mean, I'll just quickly point out that this is, as I said, as I read, it's a new zone, and I'm actually pretty excited about it because a lot of people are talking about tiny homes and smaller homes, which are a little different than multi-residential units because it facilitates people living on their own tiny lots. And so I'm excited to see it go ahead, and thank staff for all the hard work and the proponents for willing to make use of their property in this way. Thanks.
Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I will echo Councillor Frisch's comments, but would add that as with many infill developments, we do see the one proviso being residents' concerns about increased traffic and the impact on the streets and intersections in what is considered to be a pretty busy part of town. It's just something that we need to be aware of. I believe that when we see people having concerns about infill, that's part of the concern. I believe Councillor McCollum alluded to it earlier on with regards to the loss of space and the increased parking on streets and that type of thing. It's something that I think we have to be continually looking out for ways to streamline our movement of traffic, and of course getting people off the roads and into alternate modes as much as possible. But I certainly don't see that standing in the way of this zoning application. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And with that, I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
Excellent. I'm in favor as well. And moving right along to for final adoption.
I can do this one, Mayor. I'll move that official community plan amendment bylaw number 3014-2020 at 1375 Piercy Avenue, a bylaw to amend the official community plan, be finally adopted.
Second that.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the people in the neighborhood, some of whom did speak against this and have spoken against multi-family developments on this piece of property in the past. This particular neighborhood has a number of multi-family developments in it, and of course, that does exacerbate all the challenges I spoke about earlier related to traffic and parking. I think that we have to balance those concerns with the need that we see in our community for people to live. And in my view, that counterbalances the concerns, but we do have to be aware of continuing to be aware of those issues and the impact that density will have, as I mentioned before. But I'm very pleased to see this property being used for this project by Habitat, which is a good partner of the cities in this type of development, and I hope it succeeds in moving forward.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And with that, I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
And Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor?
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. All right. And another one for final adoption.
We move that zoning amendment bylaw number 3005-2020, which is for 1375 Piercy Avenue, be finally adopted.
Seconded.
Excellent. And any further questions or comments? And seeing none, I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
And Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum. Oh, Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Excellent. Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Whew. Okay, we only have one more left, and then we'll be done.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2998, 2020, 2466 Walbrand Place, a bylaw to rezone property from residential 1B to residential 1S zone to allow for a secondary suite, be finally adopted.
Second.
Excellent. Any questions or comments? And seeing none, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton, we'll poll council.
In favor?
And Councillor Frisch.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So excellent. All right, that's all the bylaws that we had for today. Only one thing left.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Excellent. I will assume everybody is in favor of adjournment.